because I'm really passionate about the law of attraction, but I mean, I'll tell you more about that at a later date. But I thought it might be really nice to do a video on on self-talk and the things that we say to ourselves, and getting to a place where we can say better things to ourselves and kinder things. So before we get into it, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, and if you hit the bell and all notifications, you should be notified every time I post a new video. So for anyone who's never heard of the term self-talk, it basically refers to the things that we say to ourselves, the thoughts that we have, but also what we say, so how we treat ourselves. So you might have heard of positive self-talk and negative self-talk. It sounds really simple, doesn't it? Just choose the positive, but it's not always that easy. So I think what can happen is we can actually get into a place where it's almost like we get into a cycle, and I think sometimes we can actually have thought so many negative thoughts that we're in a place that makes it so much more difficult to get out of. So it's so much more difficult if you're in a really difficult place emotionally, you're in a really bad place. It's hard to suddenly switch it off, and we can't suddenly switch it off all of a sudden. And sometimes we need to work up to it. So for me, there are a couple of things I do. So one of them is maybe building it. So, you might choose a slightly more positive thought and get more and more. But I probably tend not to do it that way, but that's just because that's me. I tend to try to meditate and get rid of everything, and then turn the whole thing around. It's not always so easy to do, and sometimes it does take a little bit of time. And if I have been in a really bad place, which sometimes I have been, then it can take a little while to do. So what I try to do is I try to meditate and let go of all of the thoughts. And the reason that's helpful is because it means that you're starting again. You're starting again from scratch. So instead of having all of these negative thoughts and trying to find the positive ones, while you still have all of the negative thoughts coming, it means you can actually clear everything out, get to a calm place and start again. So you're not getting into this battle with your brain, which is a battle that I used to be in all the time. When I was younger, I was always in this ongoing battle with my brain. I was always someone who overanalyzed a lot. I was what would probably be termed of as an overthinker. I would overthink everything. I would get all of these thoughts and I wouldn't know what to do with them, and I would feel like I'd need to think each thought and think it all the way to its conclusion to try to prove to myself that everything was okay. But instead of it doing that and making me feel better, I felt that the more I tried to prove it to myself that it would all be okay and that this wasn't logical, the more I tried to think about it, the worse it kind of got, because I was feeding it. Now, that's not to say that you can never have a bad thought and then, contradict it and stop it. I think if you get in there early enough, then that's fantastic. Unfortunately, that's not what I used to do. So I used to keep going with it, and then I'd bring in the positive. I'd try to bring in the positive thoughts, but it would be way too late, and there would be too many negative thoughts for me to actually be able to really convince myself. And like I said, I would just end up spiraling with it, even when I tried to choose the positive thoughts. So what was more helpful for me personally, and that might be different for you, was just letting go of everything. And I know a lot of people are like, but how do I do that? How do I let go of that? And again, meditation is what I use. It doesn't mean that it's going to work straight away, but it's something that really helped me. And what I want to say to you is you do not have to be like this perfect person to meditate. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not a meditator, I'm not the person who can meditate. Neither was I. I definitely was not someone I was definitely not someone who you would think of as being a natural meditator. But I often think that the people who are not natural meditators are actually the people who really need to meditate, and they're the people who benefit from it the most. When I first started meditating, it used to drive me absolutely mad. I found it really hard to sit still, and I realised that I don't think I'd ever sat that still before. I thought, I can't remember ever having to sit this still, and I remember feeling the pressure at first. And at first, I almost felt like I was getting anxiety because I was so focused on trying not to move. But eventually I did get used to it. I did relax into it, but it did take some time because I just wasn't used to being that still and that quiet and that calm. Self-talk is something that really fascinates me because I think that so many of us think negative things about ourselves. And the interesting thing is, I think we often don't even realise that we're actually doing it. I think sometimes it can be a little bit more subtle than that as well. It's not necessarily really structured, really coherent, definite, specific thoughts. I think sometimes it's actually more in terms of feelings. And when you actually start to think about what is it that I'm actually feeling, at least it's something that happened to me recently, you might realise that you're actually feeling a particular way about yourself. maybe because of something that you have going on, because of something that's happening. It might be because of something that happened to you, or maybe something that someone said, and other voices that you've taken on from the outside. This is something that I think we have a tendency to do as well. We have a tendency to take voices and opinions from the outside, and it's like we internalise them. And so often we don't realise we've done it, but we do it. Often we don't believe that we can do something, we don't think that we're enough for something, and it's not always because of this, but I think it's sometimes because we've taken those voices from the outside and we've believed them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that someone was intending to be negative. It might be someone who doesn't actually believe it themselves, who doesn't believe that that's possible in their own life, and they've put that on you. And I'm sure we've all had that sort of experience where we've talked to someone about something and they've said, oh, you can't do that, that won't work, that's not going to work out, you're not going to be able to do it. And it's not necessarily because they don't think that you're enough. It might be because they don't think it's realistic. So that's a word that you hear a lot. It's not realistic. It's not likely to happen. And often people think they're protecting you when that's not necessarily the case. So I think every now and then it's a good idea to sort of take stock and to sort of go inside, like go kind of within, if you want to use that word, and just think, the feelings that I'm having, are these, what I feel about me from a really positive, pure place, or are these opinions that I've taken on, like from other people, or but beliefs that I've taken on, like maybe negative beliefs or limiting beliefs that might not actually be true? And I also think it's a good idea to take stock of what you're saying to yourself in general, like both about yourself and about the world and life and what it is that's possible. So here are some of the things that have helped me. Again, one of them is meditation. The second one is consciously looking for positive things, or like happy things. Sometimes we can be so focused on one thing that we're worried about that it feels like it becomes like our whole world. Everything is about that. And if that isn't going right, or if it might even just be that we're worried that it might not go right, and suddenly it feels like our entire life, our entire world is going wrong. And that's why I think that like looking for positive things sort of maybe helps you to gain like a little bit of a new perspective or a different perspective and look at something in a slightly different way. Maybe just change your focus a bit. Maybe take your focus away from that problem that you're really worried about. Obviously, that doesn't mean you shouldn't deal with things. I just think that for me personally, sometimes I can get into a place where I think too much about something to the point where it's no longer helpful. So sometimes we might have a problem and we might feel like we need to think about it to fix it or to work it out. And sometimes if you get into a place where you're really negative about something, you feel less resourceful. So the more you try to work it out, the more you just go back, forth with like the two options that you already thought of that you don't actually like. And that's the sort of thing that I've probably done in the past. So yeah, I look for little things, happy things and positive things. And I think that can tie in with mindfulness as well. Now, mindfulness probably isn't something that I practice as much as I should, but I think maybe it works better for some people than for others. But I do think there are moments where I'm maybe accidentally in mindfulness. So mindfulness is basically where you focus on the moment and you try to focus on what you're doing. I don't know, whether it's reading a book or whether it's washing up or just like normal tasks or walking, and you try to not, rather than being in your head and thinking while you're doing something, you actually try to just be in the moment completely. So rather than your head being elsewhere, you're actually focusing on what it feels like to do the thing you're doing rather than sort of being in your head. And I'm the sort of person that spends so much time thinking, but I am trying to do it less. But there are moments, and tell me whether you've experienced this, there are moments when I found myself in mindfulness almost accidentally. So let's say if I'm dancing or I'm doing something I really enjoy where I'm really in the moment. Like dancing is one of those things where you might be just really in the moment. And in that moment, you're not thinking anything. You're just feeling. And it's like this pure sense of joy in that one moment. So let me know whether you've ever experienced anything like that. We're at the end of this video. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. I leave my Instagram handle down below as well. And so as always, thank you so much for watching. And, again, I love comments if you want to leave me any comments. And I will see you in my next video.